Good evening, everyone. As you can see, I am all by my lonesome tonight. Our co-host here, Brandon, he's feeling a little under the weather. You know, there's supposedly this flu and stuff's going around. He thinks it hit him, so he's resting tonight. Hopefully, he gets to feeling better pretty quickly. But before we go any further, let me begin the recording, and we will proceed with the Liberty Talk.
The Constitution isn't just a document. It's a blueprint for freedom. We're breaking down politics at every level, exposing government overreach, and going where the mainstream media surely won't. Join us in defending individual rights against the bureaucratic tide. You're listening to the Missouri Liberty Report.
All right, folks, and we are back with another Lonesome John edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. So, again, Brandon is out this week. He is feeling quite under the weather. So, I am all alone behind the microphone this evening, and that's okay because sometimes it's a little different just doing this, doing this thing on by yourself and being behind the mic by yourself. And so, I don't know necessarily that I'll go 2 hours on this episode. I might go an hour. I might go a little over an hour. It's hard to say. But anyway, got some news I want to cover, and a name that I haven't brought up in a while. And first of all, before we go any further, good evening to Tom and Shady J, are both in a live chat right now. But I haven't talked about a certain individual in a while. Not that that's really bothered me any, but well, and then Grant's hey, good to see Grant in the live stream as well tonight. So, and Grant somehow has read my mind. So there are 3 newspapers around the Jeff City, Columbia area that have a new owner, and you'll never guess who it is. That's right. It's Scott Faughn. Hillbilly Thunderbutt is the proud owner of 3 newspapers. And I think they're all owned by the same people, the same media company. But he is now taking over. And this article is from the Missouri Independent. Also, thanks to Gary Ride for sending me this article. I believe he sent this to me yesterday. The article is titled "New Owner with Checkered Political Past Takes Over Newspaper Serving Missouri's Capital." A trio of newspapers that cover Missouri's capital city and surrounding communities will now be run by a familiar and polarizing figure in state politics whose career has been marked by scandal. Now, this is excuse me, this is the Independent. Good Lord. And so, they're much more left-leaning generally. Sometimes they're not. They're more left-leaning. So anybody that's on the right-hand side, they're going to kind of talk this up, even though they're not really that far off the mark. Scott Faughn announced Monday that his company was taking over the Jeff City News Tribune, Fulton Sun, and California Democrat from Arkansas-based WEHCO Media, which has owned the paper since 2008. Faughn, whose company currently publishes an online compendium of press releases and opinion pieces called the Missouri Times, said in a press release that all 3 newspapers will continue to operate under their current names and locations. Employees, he said, will remain in their current positions. We are honored to carry forward the legacy of the News Tribune, Fulton Sun, and California Democrat. Our goal is to maintain the high level of service readers expect while investing in the long-term success of the publications. Walter Hussman Jr., publisher and chairman of Wecco Media, that's what I'll just call it, said at a press conference Monday that the papers have not been profitable since his company purchased them. He called community journalism a public trust, adding that he is hopeful that under local ownership, the papers will thrive. Faughn has been involved in politics since a young age. He became mayor of Poplar Bluff at the age of 22 in 2002. He then led the Poplar Bluff Chamber of Commerce and was a catalyst behind a successful effort to widen a local highway. But he was convicted in 2007 of 3 felony counts for forging checks from an account related to that effort. Oopsie. He started the Missouri Times in 2012, along with former Missouri House Speaker Ron Jetton, who was no longer involved with the company. His first brush with controversy in state politics came in 2015 when it was revealed he was hosting parties for lawmakers in Jefferson City that were paid for by lobbyists. The arrangement nearly got the Missouri Times booted from the Capitol Press Association, as it was widely seen as a strategy to help lawmakers avoid disclosure of lobbyist gift. In early 2018, Faughn paid $120,000 in cash in several installments to a St. Louis attorney who was representing the ex-husband of the woman who accused then Governor Eric Greitens of sexual assault. Shortly after the first payment, St. Louis TV station KMOV broadcast a recording provided by the ex-husband of his former wife, detailing how Greitens allegedly tied her up, stripped off her clothes, photographed her naked without her consent, and threatened to release the image if she told anyone about their affair. The recording was made without the woman's knowledge and publicized without her consent. Faughn kept the secrets payment for months while continuing to cover Greitens both in his newspaper and on his TV show. When the payments were eventually revealed during a court proceeding, Faughn fled the state to avoid a subpoena from Greitens' lawyers. When he was eventually called to testify before a Missouri House investigative committee, Faughn said under oath that the money was for the purchase of recordings of Greitens' alleged victim talking about physical abuse for a book he was working on, even though other journalists got the recordings for free. Lawmakers publicly questioned his explanation, especially after the attorney whom he paid testified that Faughn told him the money came from an unnamed wealthy Republican who did not like Greitens. One Republican called Faughn's testimony mind-boggling. Lawyers representing Greitens at the time alleged Faughn's connection was through the low-income housing tax credit industry. Greitens tried to eliminate the tax credit, while Faughn's television show was sponsored by a bank heavily involved in the industry. The Missouri Times was expelled from the Press Association over the Greitens revelations. Since then, questions about the editorial independence of Faughn's news operations have continued to swirl. Ironically, the Jeff City News Tribune was one of those organizations that most loudly denounced Faughn after his involvement in the Greitens scandal were revealed. When a journalist is more interested in being involved in a big news event than simply reporting on it, the paper argued, he no longer should be considered a journalist. Faughn's history did not come up at Monday's press conference. Hussman urged readers and the business community to rally around Faughn, who he said shares his commitment to customers and employees and the community. So there's that. It's so this dude is like herpes. He just will not go away. Now, a friend of mine, I will just say, so Gary Ridenauer hosted like a meet and greet for Holly Jones, and then Justin Sparks also attended. During this meet and greet, Sparks brought up the fact that there is a certain place you can go in Jefferson City, and it seemed like people were like almost being trapped into like some blackmail photos or something, and it's a lobbyist hangout and everything else. Now, I asked him out loud if he would come on the show and talk about it, and he said absolutely, and then I never could get him on the show. Shocker, I know. But yeah, there's no and then the Gasconade County Republican Club had a meeting, and Ben Brown and Bruce Sassman were there, and someone brought up the speakeasy thing, and they kind of joked and said, "Well, we heard you don't go there after 9 o'clock at night," and it was just kind of, ha, 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 ha. It's like, okay, they didn't really answer the question, right? They were just kind of like making a joke and then going on. Um, but there has been talk of what Scott Faughn has done. According to Sparks, there's no sign on the outside. You walk in, you walk down this hallway, and in the back, there's this big thing, chandeliers, a speakeasy. Lobbyists are there, lawmakers are there, and Scott apparently is hosting all this. Now, I don't have any videographic or photographic proof of this, right? I don't have any proof of any of this at all. But the way this man acts, the way he sucks up to, the Speaker of the House or the Senate pro tems that we've had, since I've kind of gotten involved in Missouri politics a little bit over the last few years, it is quite evident that this guy, again, sucks up to the power people in the Republican Party. I mean, the guy came out and said Greitens was one of the most, the best conservatives he'd seen. And I made fun of him and he called me a freak on X, which I was like, well, if I'm a freak, I don't know what that makes you, because I don't go around trying to, buy my way into favor and then host these events between, and buddy up to all these lobbyists. So I guess he can get all the juicy details or whatever. But I'd say if there was a contest between who's the bigger freak, me or Hillbilly Thunderbutt, I'm going to say the Hillbilly Thunderbutt takes the freak award way over anything that, that I could do. He's going to be way better at that. But again, thanks to Gary for sending that over. I looked at it and then I almost threw up on my shoes immediately. And I was like, great. So this guy, I would think at some point the politics, the opinions in that paper are probably going to swing more towards a favorability, maybe to, like John Patterson and some of these other folks, Cindy O'Loughlin and some of these other awful people in the higher positions in the Senate and in the House at the Capitol building in Jefferson City. So, nothing, there would be nothing shocking about that if that's the way it went down, right? That everything became more favorable of certain Republicans. And God knows there might be hit pieces on anybody that doesn't want to go along with the things that are being proposed here in the state. And, maybe the opinion pieces are more aimed at those dissidents, the few dissidents, I guess you say the real dissidents in the Republican Party in Jefferson City. But yeah, it's like I said, this dude's like herpes. You can't get rid of him. It sucks, but that's for the freedom of the press, right? This man can get down there and he can write his opinion pieces or have other people write their opinion pieces for that paper. And the only thing we can do is educate other people who might read that and take that as fact, or take it as, like it's the gospel. And we're going to have to continue educating people about how things really are. And that's really the only thing we can do, right? There's nothing else we can do. We don't want to go around being like the Ben Shapiro's of the world and trying to cancel people, even though he says that's not what he wants to do. But they basically want to cancel people, just maybe not government, but maybe a little bit government involvement and censorship. But they definitely want to rid us of certain personalities on the internet. Yeah, Gary says Faughn is the turd that just won't flush. That's about right. You gotta try to take a stick and like poke it, and it just won't go away. And you're like, fine, I'll just call somebody else then to clean up the mess, I guess. or I just won't use that toilet anymore. But yes, unfortunately, Scott Faughn will now be the owner of 3 newspapers, even though he said that everybody's staying. Things will be changing there. I can't see him buying these papers and not try to use those papers to influence people. And who knows, maybe he really wants the Capitol Press, credentials, and maybe he just wants to burrow himself in there even more. Oh, and I just got a text. Very interesting. Faughn's fiance is also the treasurer of the HRCC. Well, very interesting. I didn't know that. Um, let's see. Um, I'm just gonna do a quick web search here, and let's see. What is she? So it says Alex Riley. And I don't know. Let's see. I have to look. Let's see. Let's see if I can find a picture of Alex Riley here. Well, this says it's a dude. So I don't know if maybe this person's not the leader anymore. Let me see. Let me make sure I read that message correctly before I stick my foot. Oh, so it's his fiance is also. Oh, she's a treasurer, not the head. Stupid. I apologize. I apologize there. Somehow it's okay. All right. Well, let's see if I can find an image. I can't find an image, but anyway, I also don't doubt that at all. Faughn is going to be, um, Faughn is just a guy. Grant says Faughn is as close to state-run media you can get when you buy those specific papers. Absolutely right. He is going to have himself fully embedded in state politics. I think he wants to influence as much as he can. Maybe maybe he can write up these puff pieces for different lobby organizations and everything. But once he takes full ownership, it'll be interesting to see the transition, to see whether or not this guy goes full send on his the sucking up to the lobbyists and certain powerful Republicans in the state of Missouri, like Kehoe and Patterson and the like. And the more liberty lovers will probably get way less attention unless they happen to segue or parallel to something that maybe the higher ups in the Republican Party want to do. Someone's trying to dig in to the official position for me, but maybe I should just do a web search on. Let me see. I'll just do a very quick web search on Scott Faughn, HRCC. Yeah, I'm just seeing articles about controversial political figure acquires Missouri Capital newspapers, Mid-Missouri papers return to local ownership. But I'm not seeing anything here about anything that ties those two together. But yeah, he's a douche canoe, and people are. Grant says he'll have to keep it cool for a bit because he has a fiduciary responsibility to keep it afloat. That's true. That is true. But after a certain time, I would say maybe he's gonna, we're gonna see Maybe it'll be scattered throughout, but I'm sure at some point he's going to try to get better coverage for his favorite Republicans, and maybe I should put it that way. But yeah, I'm not going to say who sent me these messages, but I would consider them a very good source of information. I'll just put it that way, and I'll leave it at that. But I tell you what, like getting people to come out and talk about Faughn, like that are in the Capitol as representatives or senators. Like nobody wants to. Oh, she's the political director of the HRCC. Um, so however you put it, uh, there's that seems um a bit hinky, I would say. And I'm not it just everything about him is shady. I'm not, if you've listened to the show for any length of time, I'm not a fan of this gentleman. And but like I said, he is such a suck up. It is horrible. Like when he posts stuff on X a lot of times, the way he literally fawns over some of these people is vomit inducing to say the least. Um, and he'll go after people if they kind of like, want to call him out on something. Then he reverts to like typical like elitist behavior where he wants to call you names, like he called me a freak because I just happened to disagree with him about former Governor Parsons, just very conservative um actions and just calling him such a conservative, like stalwart. And I thought, Jesus, man, like what if you looked at the way the things that Parson wanted to get done, of course, we all know Parson is he was big on like agricultural tax credits and well, just tax credits in general. But he was far from a conservative leader. I mean, COVID, he was just so wishy-washy. He just like, well, I'll leave the local areas to decide how they want to do things. But he just let the like St. Louis County and Jackson County and some of these counties just absolutely trample all over people. And he didn't, to me, the right way would have been, the right way to go about it would have been, hey, can we at least adhere to the Constitution here? Like nowhere in the Constitution does it say state or federal that if there's a virus that comes through, we take all these things and we throw them out the window and act like the Constitution doesn't exist anymore. He didn't really do that. He was just very squishy. But he when Greitens lost his job, he took over, and then he got elected to one more term, and nothing in this state really improved. I mean, he did sign SEPA into law, and of course, the federal courts jacked that up. But we got nothing else. Like we didn't get really less taxation. He really wanted he didn't really push to fight against any kind of tax increases really or anything like that. And that's like a huge thing. It just things there were no real great improvements in the state of Missouri under Parsons' leadership. right? It was the same old, like, standard Republican ideas, supposedly the big red ideas, sometimes some people like to call them. And but there was nothing there that we were like, oh yeah, that was definitely very, whatever you would some of us would maybe consider a conservative compared to the actions of current so-called conservatives in the state of Missouri. Um, there was nothing about him to gloat over and really like brag about. Unless you want to be an elite or you are in league with the elites in the Republican Party in Missouri, then yeah, sure, there's all kinds of things to brag about. Because if you rub elbows with all these people and get yourself an in with them, and you can try to influence political policy, then it's like, then it's cool. Like Parsons is great, or if you're Scott Faughn, it's great. But if you're a normal everyday Missourian, what can you really point at that Parson did that made Missouri better for just everyday people? And I would venture to guess that you couldn't really come up with anything solid. You couldn't come up with anything meaningful. It would be stuff that it would just be stuff that that liberty lovers would be like, "What are you talking about? Like, what is this? Like, this is nothing. This is nothing. This is meaningless. This is the standard Republican jargon that we're going to throw out at people, toss in their face, make them sound like we're all big and we're, beating our chest, and we're making fun of liberals, which is fun to do, and sometimes there's good reason to make fun of liberals. But if that's all you have to brag on, is you get to make fun of liberals, and you get to, you know, and that's it. It's like, well, that's what else is there? But unfortunately, there are people in this state and all across the country that if the right people come out and get in front of a microphone and say the key things that make liberals look dumb, but there's really no actions that come from it. There's nothing meaningful. We don't gain freedom. We don't gain liberty. We don't get to keep more of our earnings. To the people who really want freedom back, it's just annoying. It's irritating, and it's a complete and utter waste of our time. It's the simpletons that like dig in like hogs in a trough and just scarf it down. And it's those people are stuck in the paradigm, left right paradigm, and they're just fighting back and forth and throwing um insults at each other, but no one's fixing anything. But somehow that makes them feel much better because they're out there fighting a good fight against liberals. Like, name calling's fun a little bit. Like, I do it sometimes, right? I have a nickname for Scott Faughn, right? Hillbilly Thunderbutt. Pretty proud of myself for that one. But me calling him that name doesn't fix anything. What we have to focus on are his actions and the things he said. I mean, the guy had oh my God. Why can't I think of the previous Speaker of the House? We have Patterson now, and the one before him was, why am I blanking out? This is terrible. It's Tuesday and I'm already brain dead. Um, it's right there on the tip of my tongue. But anyway, he had him on, or he'd be on his show talking about he's got, that guy's got really great hair. Like, you wouldn't think so for his age, but he's got really great hair. And it's like, what does that have to? Oh, it was right there and it's gone again. But it's like, what the heck does that have to do with the price of rice in China? About a guy's hair? Like, who cares about his hair? We're worried about the policies that he thinks is important. We're worried about good, liberty-loving legislation making it through to the end. And he wasn't, of course. But yeah, it makes my head hurt. And But yeah, that's what we'll get from Scott Faughn. He's not going to change. He just owns more, newspapers now, and he will be even more entrenched in the quote unquote media. This is why it's another reason why it's so awesome that that like podcasters and stuff are taken more seriously now. I'm not talking about myself, but there's some really good podcasts out there, right? And some very well researched and read people out there that are more dependable than even your local media can be sometimes. Owensville's had plenty of proof when it came to the water park and other things. They were biased. They wanted the water park. And so if you had something good to say about it, they would put you up in the front. If you had something bad to say about it, they'd put you way in the back of the paper. They didn't want people reading negative things about a water park that was up for vote, right? So it's just it's the same it's the same knuckleheads all over again. Um, over and over go over in the papers. There might be a few good pieces here and there, but there's some bias there. And that's why I'm happy that the legacy media, whether it's local papers or national news, they're losing their shine. And people are taking them less seriously and moving toward, now I'm not saying every podcaster's like great and take everything they say like, oh my God, these people are amazing. Because there are several influencers out there and podcasters that are still trying to peddle the same elitist like nonsense. But there's a good chance they're getting paid well to do it. They might be getting a $7,000 check to say some stupid things that normal people wouldn't find enlightening or it's like, that's a tired argument. Let's get rid of that. Like Netenyahu saying the Iranians are producing a missile and they're producing a nuclear bomb again. They're very close. I mean, that's only been happening for 20 years, but every time you turn around, Netanyahu swears that Iran's very close to a nuclear weapon. And so after a while, people stop listening, right? After a while, it's, the boy who cried wolf. You just go, okay. So people are, more and more people, especially the younger people, are moving towards other forms of media. And as much as I feel bad for maybe the people that worked at the newspaper, nothing would make me happier than Scott Faughn, a business that Scott Faughn owns, going out of business because the crap that he's trying to peddle, no one's eating that anymore. No one's taking that seriously. And they're all like, all right, dude, you keep coming around with the same stupid argument time and time again. And, it may get to a point where only the people who are so entrenched in the left-right paradigm, those are the only readers. And those people will become less and less as time goes on. Now, that's on the right. A lot of people, a lot of youth are getting captured by the left side of the political aisle because they seem to be in the positions like in education and at these universities and everything else. So we've still got our work cut out for us. But if Republicans at the national level and at the state level don't get their stuff figured out, they are screwed. These people, now again, there are people out there, again, we've covered this several weeks, that want to make it sound like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson are why, the Republican Party is tearing itself apart. And that is not true. That is not true. If you have enough sense in your head, that's not true. It's the fact that they could have a majority and they still won't do anything. And the people who closely follow the Republicans and just vote Republican blindly can't see that what they get so mad about from the left side of the political aisle is also being done to them by the right side of the political aisle. Right? They're trying to, if you don't want to go along and do it their way, well, then you're an anti-Semite or you're a Putin sympathizer or whatever it is, right? You're something. but you're not a real Republican. You're not real MAGA. You're not a real conservative. So the Republicans are just as guilty as the left, and the right is just eating its own right now. They're going to lose big in the midterms. That's my prediction. They're going to get their butts handed to them in the midterms. And then they're going to blame whoever it is. That's not really their fault, right? They won't take ownership for losing that. They'll create a boogeyman, and they'll go back to the Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes and the Tucker Carlsons and maybe Dave Smith and some of these others. It's like, no, this is fully in your lap. State of Missouri also has its problems. Now we have Kehoe. He wants to get rid of the income tax. Problem is, most all of the Republicans, you'll find a few, and you don't hear any Democrats talking about the most important thing, the cutting of spending. And it's like everybody wants to run in a deficit. And that only lasts so long. And then you get people who come in later and say, well, we're just going to have to raise taxes because we can't do this. And they'll just get the money from somewhere else, right? It's the same tired old government revolving door of deficit spending and more taxation and then more deficit spending and more taxation. And then the people who aren't getting the handouts and the people that don't have, the very wealthy that don't have friends in government to write regulations to knock their competition out of business, the people in the middle like you and I are the ones who are left to suffer. And that would be the fault of Democrats and Republicans both. And you will not change my mind on that. You won't. Because like I said, I can think of 2-3 people in Jefferson City right now that would really probably, maybe a few that I just don't know about very well, but there's 3 that I can think of offhand right now that would recommend cutting spending. Bryant Wolfen, Mike Moon, Darren Chappell. Those are 3 I can think of off the top of my head that I know for sure would be like, yeah, we need to cut spending for sure. That should be a priority in this state. Let's not end up like St. Louis County. That's $60-80 million in the hole because every year when the budget, when they do the budgets for these agencies, whether those agencies spend all the money or not, they're just giving them an increase. They ask for the increase, and the executives giving them the increase. And then now there's a few, they're like, hey, you guys are going to have to cut your budgets. And then Sam Page is like, well, we can just come up with this use tax. And that'll generate X amount of dollars. And we don't, and it's the same, just spend. Don't want to offend anyone. Don't want to really fix it. They have to put on this persona that everything's fine. And there's no problems, there's no issues, there's no real spending problem because everybody, we have to have these programs. Either you have like Medicaid expansion gets voted in, and at some point federal funding starts drying up for that, and the state because it's the law, the state has to come up. Gary Ridenauer says Mazzy Christensen should probably be another one. But the state's going to have to come up with those funds because people don't understand that you don't expand Medicaid. So it's going to be very, very interesting over the next few years. If they decide to come up with some way, like if the budget, or they hit some certain revenue, then the income tax gets cut even more, and until they completely eliminate it, what they're going to do about spending. And from the big shots in Jefferson City, I'm not hearing anything but the normal rhetoric that you always hear, right? We're conservatives and we want smaller government and less taxes and this, but at the end of the day, they don't do any of those things. The government grows. They spend millions of dollars on a park over I-70 out by Kansas City. You know, the thing that too many people don't understand. I was just talking to somebody the other day at work about the governor having line item veto power, right? He can go through that budget and he can just nope, 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 nope. Now the legislature, I'm sure, could override that, but maybe the governor says, "Well, that's cool. You want to keep spending this money, and I'll just veto every bill that has anything to do with increasing the cost of anything. I'll make you all work for everything. You'll have to override all my vetoes. If you don't cut out this pork and this crap out of this budget, everything that comes to my desk, if it's not constitutional and it doesn't increase the freedom of people, I'll veto it automatically. I won't even think about it." Now, you're going to find very few people that would act that way, but they do have that power. They just don't exercise that power. Now, he did. Parson exercised it one year when they decided they want to put a landfill right across the road from a school near a big subdivision. And a senator wanted to put in so much. Now, it was, compared to a lot of other things in the budget, it was a drop in the bucket. But he's like, all right, I'll put this money in the budget to do a study on the effects of putting that landfill here. Now, it'd been like $600,000 or $700,000, right? Budgetarily, that's a drop in the bucket for Missouri, right? When you see how much education and some of these other agencies get, that $700,000 is a drop in the bucket. But this was his like last ditch effort to put a halt to that landfill for a while. Now, Parson could have went in and looked at that and said, that seems feasible. That seems reasonable and logical. You want to put a park over I-70 in Kansas City? Scribble it out. But he didn't. He went through and he scratched out the money for that study and then left the money in the budget to build a park over I-70. So I would like Hillbilly Thunderbutt to explain to me how that's so conservative, how that's a big freedom, limited government, less money spending. How does that remotely line up to anything that would be considered smaller government? It's not, of course. We all know that. People who listen to the show pretty much have that figured out, right? It's just the fact that they're not going to admit it. They're going to lie. They got enough people who want to keep a Republican majority in the state, scared to death of Democrats, which you kind of should be most times. And they just use that on people to scare them into continually voting for the same milquetoast Republicans. Spineless, for the most part, spineless. There are a few that are strong-willed, but a lot of spineless people who just won't say no to powerful figures and say, I'm not going to do that. We as a party are not going to do this anymore. Our constituents don't like it. They feel like they're continually being bent over, so we're going to change. No. Again, there are a few that you could talk to and they'll listen and you can tell you're on the same page and they want to work on those things. But there's way too few of those people. And so Missouri, with the legislature the way it stands and the leadership that we have, things aren't going to change. They're going to continue spending money and they might cut some taxes out, but they're not going to cut the spending. So it's just irresponsible at this point. Would I love to see the end of the income tax? I would especially like the personal property tax to go away. Something to that effect. Would I like that to go away? Absolutely. Who wouldn't want some of these taxes to go away? You'd have to be out of your mind to go, oh no, you'd have to be Democrats to go, don't cut any taxes. That would be a normal response. Sure, cut some of the taxes out. Stop committing so much theft of my wallet, of my hard-earned money. Stop doing that. But also, good sir, might I add, stop spending so much money. Stop taking so much, and also on top of that, stop spending so much. But we're only looking at one portion of the problem. And I don't know what it is, folks. I don't know if it's because they've been spending so much money for so long. If suddenly they come out and admit it, they all look bad to people. Like, what do you mean you're overspending? You told us you were doing good things, and we kept voting for you. And you've actually been spending more. Like, yeah, yes, ma'am or sir, we have been. And if you paid close enough attention, you would notice this. But that's not happening enough. So we're just getting the same old tired establishment Republican crap. And then we have a few stars in that building who, I'm not saying they're not trying. Of course they're trying. They go in there with the attitude of, I want to make things better for the people of the state of Missouri in a good way. I want to quit. I want to cut spending out. I want to get rid of these stupid regulations. But then trying to convince their colleagues to do the same thing. Now that's a whole nother matter. When the Republican Party is so heavily dependent on lobbyists to keep their majority, how are you going to get the good things done? So not only do you have to try to figure out a way to get these people to cut your taxes and to cut spending, but somehow you also have to get them off the gravy train of lobbyist money. And good luck with that. We have Republicans who seem to be okay with a non-governmental organization coming in and working with the state tax commission and trying to force assessors to sign on, saying that they will increase valuations on property by 14.9%, at least 14.9%. And if they don't, their budgets and their jobs are threatened. If this is the so-called conservative haven, if Missouri is just this big conservative state, those things, if by my definition of conservative, those things would never happen, ever. Those things wouldn't be allowed. They would be laughed out of the building. But we don't see that. We don't see that. Because as much as some of these people would like to say that they are conservative, they are, the Democrats say that Republicans are bought and paid for. And it makes a lot of them upset, but there are a lot of a lot of Republicans bought and paid for. Now, Democrats won't take accountability, and they'll act like they're not also bought and paid for, but that's ridiculous, right? Obama, his cabinet was pretty much, Citibank said, here's your cabinet members. Here are the people you're going to hire for your cabinet when you win. That's bought and paid for. Now, they're not going to admit to that. They don't want to admit that they're, Jesus, Obama was bought and paid for, but he was. He he ran drone strikes on weddings. He killed American citizens. You won't hear them talk about that for the most part, because that's what you say about Republicans. You can't say that about yourself. That's Republican stuff, and we don't do Republican stuff. They do. They just don't want to. They don't want you to know that they operate in that manner. And so I don't know what's going to happen, folks. Well, I do. I do know that they're going to continue to act in the same way they've been acting until the people of the state of Missouri, that's what it's going to take. Don't depend. Some people depend on the lawmakers to change their own minds. The ones who have gone astray, they're not going to. You have to force them to change their mind, and not by violent force, right? But enough people getting together and saying, we're watching every vote you make. And if you do that one more time, you will not be in this building next session. And we will do everything in our power. And then, make it so. Get boatloads of people to contact them and go, yeah, we are paying attention. Here's all the votes that you've taken up so far this year. And we think that you're just voting unconstitutionally 95% of the time. And we're done with that. So either fix it or we'll have you go home. If that doesn't happen, expecting the majority of those people to just change themselves, good luck. Because the lobbyist money and the higher ups of the Republican Party want them to do certain things, and if they'll tell them, if you do these certain things, we'll make sure that you term out, right? You'll get your 8 years in, and you'll be good. Kevin Spacey says, John, what is your opinion of podcasts hosted by losers with no co-host? Their podcasts suck, but some people still listen to them. Some people are also nice enough not to come into the comment section and say nasty things to the host, but it's cool. I don't have any feelings that you can hurt. So there you go, Kevin. He's joking around, of course, of people that never seen him comment in here before. But I have something else that I want to talk about here. Let me get back to finding it. These articles, dude, you want to talk about driving me up a wall. Hold on, let me get rid of this stupid crap here. Share my screen so you all can see this as I scroll through. This one also made me want to vomit. This was from KSDK, and this was from earlier today, 8:54 this morning. We will see a continued increase. Flu cases spike over holidays. Doctors warn it's just the beginning. Doctors said the rise in cases is a blame on the new flu strain, subclade K. Oh, the name. Flu cases across Missouri and Illinois are on the rise as the holiday travel season continues. It's a trend the CDC is reporting across the country, and one Dr. Molly Spire said is no different at the Total Access Urgent Care in St. Louis County. We are certainly seeing the uptick of the flu season. Currently, we are about 37% positivity rate. Dr. Spire said a lot of it's to blame on the new flu strain, subclade K, and she's worried they haven't seen the worst of it yet. We expect after the Christmas holiday over the next week to two that we will see a continued increase, and hopefully it will start slowing down. But as we know from previous seasons, it may be 2 or 3 months into early spring before the flu finally goes away. That means the clock is ticking for you to get your vaccine. There it is. According to Dr. Spire, despite the predominant strain mutating slightly, it's still your best form of protection. That one, although it has developed some resistance to the flu vaccine, here we go. The flu vaccine does still have some effectiveness in terms of reducing the severity of symptoms if you do get it, she said. If you spent the week gathered around the dining room table with family and friends and start to not feel your best, Dr. Spire said, don't wait it out at home and go see a doctor immediately. With influenza, if you get it caught early enough, within the first 48 hours, there are antivirals available, Zofluza or Tamiflu, that can reduce the length of time of the symptoms. We don't want you to just push through at work because everyone at work will get sick as well, she said. But Dr. Spire said the best way to prevent the flu is by getting the vaccine. Also, remember to wash your hands, cover your mouth when you cough and sneeze, and stay home if you're feeling sick. No freaking kidding. But I just had to read that. I just had to read that because you knew somewhere in that article they're going to be like, better go get your vaccine. Better go get your flu shot, even though it's mutated and it's probably not going to keep you from getting sick. It might make the symptoms milder. Now, where have I heard that before? Huh. That's weird. I think we heard that in 2021, 2022 with a different thing called COVID. That didn't work out so slick, even though they swore up and down it saved a lot of lives. Because, well, in the beginning, you wouldn't get COVID. But then, because you wouldn't get sick if you got the shot. But then it's like, oh, you'll still get sick, but it won't be as bad. And now we have it here. Well, just go ahead and get the vaccine. You may still get the flu, but it may make the symptoms more mild. Folks, and I'm not on here to browbeat everybody whether they want to get a vaccine or not. I'm not here to debate that. I'm not here to call you a fool or dumb if you go out and get the vaccine. I've never got the flu vaccine. I remember I worked at a place one time, um, and I agree with Turd Burglar. He said that Kevin Spacey guy is a real jerk. I agree with that. But I remember working in a place and like the local hospital came in. You get like a flu shot for like $5 or something cheap, right? These people got it. And then there was just people that were gone a week, got sick as a dog. And I'm talking people just never miss a day. And they're coming back to work like, I was so sick. And I'm like, oh, it sucks because I never got the flu that year. And then come around the next year, they're doing them again. And they go, oh, hey, John, are you going to get your flu vaccine? I go, no. And I looked at him like, no. I had this look on my face of like, are you out of your mind? And they're like, why not? I go, I don't know. That's weird because last year I watched a bunch of you take it and then you were all out sick. And you got sick anyway. We're like, well, that was probably a fluke. I go, you do whatever you want, but I'm not taking it. And that's my thing. You want to get the flu shot, get the flu shot. Dang, Turd Burglar says people who don't get vaccines should be shipped off to their own island. I know he's joking, but some people probably actually feel that way. Some people probably actually feel like if you don't get vaccinated enough, that you should just be, you shouldn't even be able to leave your house. You should just stay quarantined the whole flu season or whatever. You should be shamed, publicly shamed, and not have a job and can't go to a restaurant and all kinds of things. They probably think that, even if it's just a flu vaccine. But my immune system may not be the strongest in the world, but it's also not super weak. And so I'm not really, if I get the flu, yes, I'll probably feel like crap. And then I'll just take zinc and some other stuff to help my immune system out a little bit more and, kind of just soldier through it. Again, that's how I look at it because every year they admit that they just think it's going to be a specific strain, but if they get it wrong, then you're not protected anyway. So every year it's like a roll of the dice, whether if you get the flu shot, whether it's going to be the right one or not. So it doesn't even make sense. I don't even know what the actual the percentage of success of them picking the right strain every year. I haven't ever looked that number up. I'm not going to right now. It doesn't interest me. It's whatever. Like, okay, cool. It's funny. It doesn't matter when it comes from like government agencies and media and stuff. It's just the same old tired, recycled like keyword phrasing and everything else, right? With COVID, with the flu, with wars, with taxes. You got these greedy companies, these greedy billionaires. It's never the government. It's never the government that's greedy. It's always everyone else. And it's just the same old tired argument over and over again. And I just get sick to death of hearing it. I get sick and tired of listening to these people use the same phrasing over and over again. And then I also get tired of a bunch of people falling for it. Now, I get it. There is a risk, you get some people have compromised immune systems. and they've got to try to do things they think will help them. And I'm not going to begrudge them for that. I'm not going to make fun of them or shame them for that, because I don't walk around with a compromised immune system. That's a different world you're living in, right? Because something minor could turn into something major. So they have to protect themselves in other ways that healthy people don't necessarily have to. And so I'm not going to sit here and make fun of them. But I'm also not going to come out and go get your flu shot or go get this vaccine. You're not going to hear that out of my mouth either. I'm not going to get into some debate with somebody over it. I'm definitely not a doctor or a medical expert. I'm just going my views are based on life experiences and the things that I've read and seen. And so, there was a post on Facebook one time. People were talking about the science, just that very general thing, the science. And then people were like, I trust the science, and that's why I get vaccinated. That's why I got boosters or whatever. And these people that don't get vaccines are just MAGA people. Okay, sure. And all this other nonsense, they're just rolling out the normal uh, shaming techniques. And but I made a post that said, during COVID, we were told all these things that weren't true. The 6 feet apart, that was an arbitrary number, and things like that. And I said, they lied to us about the vaccine, the effectiveness of it, yada, yada, yada. And I said, you want to sit here and make fun of people who don't get all these vaccines, but can you blame them? Like, can you really blame them for feeling this way after what we lived through just a few years ago? And you get the people laughing at you. And it's like, okay, because you're not thinking for yourself. You're doing whatever makes the other people happy in your echo chamber. This narrow, unenlightened doesn't impress me. And that's one point. Like sometimes I get sucked into like a Facebook post in the comment section, and I'll make a comment, and people will react, and my go-to is, have you tried thinking for yourself? Now, a lot of people don't even react to that. It's like they don't. They're just used to people firing names back at them, and and just the normal back and forth of mindless sheep. And I don't do that. I try to just put some facts in there and then see how they're going to react to it. And I just I don't get into the name calling so much. Don't get me wrong, I want to. I want to sometimes, but I try not to, because I try to get those. Yeah. Turk Burglar said people who trust the science also believe men can have periods and women can have men's sexual organs. So that's true. But I try to come back with them at facts, or at them with facts. And it's interesting to see how many times no one responds when you do that. If you come at them and call them a name, then them and their friends will try to gang up on you. And it's just a back and forth. And it's just a waste of energy typing out those comments. So I try not to get hung up in that. I try to just lay out some facts and then sit back and wait for a response. And 96% of the time, somewhere in there, I don't ever get a response. They just blow past it and they go on, waiting for their next mindless victim to come along and say something ignorant. And then they just think they're morally and intellectually superior to you. And again, narrow, unenlightened doesn't impress me. And this is coming from a guy who's pretty freaking dumb, right? Pretty stupid, but I'm not that stupid. So there's something that I can hang my hat on and I can be proud of. That I might be dumb, but I'm not that dumb. And the fact that over the years that I've been looking at politics and looking at different things, that I've kept the ability to change my mind and my thought process and my perspective on different topics. Now, and I will differ from other people. I used to think that, like, I used to kind of think like the New World Order. When I thought of the New World Order, when people talk about the New World Order, I thought it was like, global, all these, excuse me, governments coming together and just full blown tyranny. And I still think that the full blown tyranny would definitely be a thing because that's already on the horizon now, right? That's you can't just go, well, we won't have full blown tyranny. Of course we will. If you let these people have their way, you're going to have full blown tyranny. I see it more. I'm more after like looking at our foreign policy and some of these other things. I look at it as America trying to dominate the world, and the world order would be what the United States wants, and these people that are hiding in the background. But the United States would be at the forefront, at the head of it. That not like all these governments coming together and joining it, just the United States trying to just literally have a global empire. And they're already trying that. Look at all the stuff, all the foreign intervention that we have now, right? Um, so that's the way I look at it now. I might change my mind down the road, right? I might go out and go, I don't like now that I've read some other stuff and looked at some other things. Now I think it might be this way. But I'm kind of looking at it in that direction. I don't I also I got in a mindset for a while of thinking everything was like an evil conspiracy. And I've kind of gotten away from that. Sometimes when I look at legislation, it's just some legislators, because of their beliefs on how government should operate, they're not necessarily evil, they're just stupid. And they think they can pass this piece of legislation, again, looking at the intent and not the outcome of that said bill, and that sometimes they're just stupid or they're bought and paid for. And whatever it is to retain their power, it's not that they're necessarily like, like, the prototypical like evil villain in a movie, but they're stupid and they're easily manipulated by money and just like the dangling of the carrot. But they're not necessarily some part of like some shadow organization. But then there are other people who clearly want to dominate everything and everyone around them, and they want to be the leaders in the domination. And that's buying themselves political favors, getting laws passed, but at the end of the day, they want to own something, and they want to own all of it in whatever category that is, right? That's the way I look at things now. But yeah, I used to for a while. I thought everything was just this giant evil conspiracy, and I've kind of backed away from some of that because I started thinking about it, started listening to these people talk, hearing some of these people. I'm like, oh, they're not evil. They're just really stupid. Like they're just trying to do whatever they can to make themselves a lot of money, but they don't necessarily want to quote unquote rule the world. They just like the gravy train they're on and they want to continue. Now, that is kind of evil, but not like demonic evil. Like, you know what I'm saying? And so I've kind of changed my stance on that a little bit. And I might change it again down the road. Um, but that's what's nice about thinking for yourself. You're more likely to, as you see facts and hear things and read things, that your mind is able to change its position. You're able to think through something and go, okay, well, I used to think this way, but this sounds more logical to me and more feasible and more reasonable. Not reasonable, and that makes me more comfortable, just more reasonable in the way the world operates. And so I think I kind of feel this way, and that's okay. You're not going to agree with everybody all the time, but that's okay. I'd rather see somebody who operates like that than a Republican or a Democrat who is just tied at the hip to whatever political party they feed off of, even though technically the party's feeding off them because the parties are a parasite and they're feeding off and just sucking the livelihood out of the people. But the people are like, I kind of like this parasite. It's kind of cool. Sometimes it says funny stuff about the other side, so I'm cool with them. And the people are just happy with the parasite that's just sucking them dry, just draining their wallets, and they're just like, "Oh, that's cool." But at least it's my party doing it, not those other guys. At least my party, takes its march. Our foreign policy when my guy's in office is taking marching orders from Bibi Netanyahu and not somebody else. I was like, oh, there's a real good thing to brag on. I did see a post from Mark Levin, I think, that Trump got some kind of award from Israel, and he was just so happy. He probably wet his pants about it. I might have saved it. I don't remember if I saved the post. I hope I did. I hope I bookmarked it. Yes. Fantastic, Mark Levin says. POTUS receives first ever top honor from Israel to a non-Israeli. Congratulations, Mr. President. So, Prime Minister of Israel posted on X yesterday. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Education Minister Yoav Kish informed U.S. President Donald Trump that they have decided to award him the Israel Prize for his unique contribution to the Jewish people, which means that he's doing whatever Benjamin Netanyahu wants him to do. And we also know that Benjamin Netanyahu wants the U.S. government to attack Iran again. That right there is what's tearing the Republican Party apart. Attacking people like Thomas Massey and even MTG, and attacking Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Megan Kelly, and some of these other people who just asking questions. Attacking them is what's tearing the Republican Party apart. And then seemingly taking marching orders from Benjamin Netanyahu is also what's tearing the Republican Party apart. Don't, at the national level, don't let them fool you into thinking otherwise, please. Keep your thinking caps on. And if you have, I feel bad for you if you have loved ones who are stuck in this idea that biblically we have to just do whatever, we have to stick up for Israel no matter what they do. Good old turd burglar with some great comments in here. But they just, I still hear people saying this stuff, and it's like, I don't, you know, there are a few things in this world today that make me just want to slam my head into a wall until I either go unconscious or my head just goes through the wall, right? And then I have to do some drywall repair. And it's things like that, that we just have to do whatever. We have to stick up for Israel no matter what their policies are, because that's what the Bible says. That drives me absolutely insane. And then seeing that, Netanyahu contacted the president of Somaliland and was saying, like, we recognize your statehood, and they've been a state for so long, but no one else would recognize them. And so they couldn't get big loans, and they weren't able to really work any trade agreements with, because they weren't recognized as a state. And then Netanyahu's the first to do it. And then Trump's like, well, I'm going to see what Netanyahu does first. Like, no, dude, you can do this on your own. Make up your mind. You can either say, I recognize him as a state, or I don't recognize him as a state. You could do that without Netanyahu's approval. If you have to wait to see what a leader of another country does, then you're not America first. And that should be blatantly obvious. That should have been blatantly obvious before that, right? Whatever he said about Netanyahu now, that should have been blatantly obvious. Yeah, I agree with Gary Ridenour. Thomas Massey for president. I doubt he would ever run for office. But a Thomas Massey Rand Paul ticket, even though it's not possible because they're both from the state of Kentucky. If we find someone who's close to Rand Paul or Thomas Massey to be the vice presidential candidate, I would just like to see them on the debate stage, because Thomas Massey, it doesn't matter what those idiots say, Thomas Massey is going to have a better argument on every topic, and it's going to be much more intelligent and sound than whatever made up nonsense those people can spew forth from their mouths. So it would be fun. He has no shot at winning because APAC and every other lobbyist organization, every big bank, everybody would be against him. He would have to pretty much solely rely on money from people. It would have to truly be like a grassroots. I'm not saying it's not possible because Ron Paul did some stuff. Ron Paul got a lot of money. He raised the most money from active military members in a time of war beyond every other candidate. So I'm not saying it can't happen. But I just God, I hope we see. I would love to see it. I would just love to see how the reactions from the debates, because the Sean Hannitys and Mark Levins and a whole bunch of other them, a whole bunch of other of those people of that ilk would just they'd give him the same treatment they gave Ron Paul. It wouldn't be good. They'd try to badmouth him, and I mean, uh, Ben Shapiro hated Ron Paul. And if Ben Shapiro is this big freedom, free market type of guy, like he said in his last speech, then he should have loved Ron Paul. Nope, he didn't like him because Ron Paul's not an interventionist, right? Thomas Massey's not really an interventionist either. And so the prototypical Russian, uh, the prototypical establishment Republicans and their ilk, they would just, oh my God, they would hate him. They would just trash him. Gary Ridenhour says Thomas Massey and Bryant Wolfen on the ticket. That would be an interesting ticket. See him picking Bryant Wolfen as his vice presidential candidate. Let's make that happen. That'd be a good ticket. I'd vote for that in a heartbeat. But anyway, folks, just I know we have to go out and deal with people who can't think for themselves. And the best thing I can tell you is try to be patient, try to feed them some good information, get them thinking for themselves a little bit, at least do the research and see what conclusion they come up with. Don't try to force the conclusion on. Just give them the information, try to get them to read it or watch it or listen to it or whatever, and get them to turn it over in their minds. And maybe they come to a conclusion that's more realistic and truthful. Turd Burglar says Newsom Pelosi. I would love to see what kind of ticket that would be, and then see actually how many votes they would get, because I think you would get the blind people that just always vote Democrat, but then a lot of people would be like, yeah. I think a lot of independents would be like, not no, but hell no. But anyway, that's all we can do, right? That's all we can do is put the information out, try to get people to think for themselves and think it through, and hopefully come to the conclusion that liberty is the best idea and tyranny is the worst idea. Less government is beneficial. Less regulation is beneficial. Less spending, less taxes. That's the responsible thing to do. That's the correct thing to do. But they're saying you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. That's just like it is for people who don't want to think for themselves. And there are people that you'll never get to, but there are some people out there that can change. And I am living proof of that because I used to be a Democrat. And thanks to some friends, they got me turned around. And now I am more libertarian. Definitely not Republican, definitely not Democrat. I would say I'm libertarian. If I had to put myself under a political party, I would definitely say more libertarian. All right, folks. I think I'm just going to cut it off now in the show where we're at. I went a little longer than I thought I was going to be able to, which is fine. But thanks. There's a very lively live chat tonight. I greatly appreciate everybody who joined in, and hopefully Brandon will be feeling much better next week. And again, don't forget, it'll be the first Tuesday of the month, so we will be joined by none other than Mr. Tom Martz, our Missouri State Constitution guy. And, there's probably some more pre-filed bills that we can talk about. There's a whole host of topics that we'll be able to cover next week. But make sure you come back at 6:30 next Tuesday night and join Brandon, Tom Martz, and myself for another edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. To those of you who watch on YouTube, Facebook, or Rumble, we appreciate you. If you listen via podcasting app or at molibertyradio.us, we appreciate your continued listenership. Terry Burglar says Brandon is sick of you. That might be. He might be sick of me. It's hard to say. I know I get sick of me, and I think a lot of other people do too. But I still come on here just about every Tuesday night and fill your ears with my nasally voice, my my nasally irritating voice. And some of you still stick around, and we appreciate those of you that do. But anyway, folks, that's going to do it for this week's show. Have a happy new year. Don't go out and do anything too silly. Don't get too inebriated and throw up on your own feet or throw up in the bed or all over the carpet. If you're going to throw up, make sure you make it to the toilet. All right. Make it to the toilet. But again, I wish you all a safe and happy new year. And we'll see you right back here next Tuesday night at 6:30 p.m. Central for another edition of the Missouri Liberty Report.